we really need to continue to make the case why gender equality and women's empowerment is important for climate justice, for climate action, and how women are on one hand differentially and more and first to be impacted by climate change, and how they are least equipped in terms of provision of resources to deal with climate change, and how that resource of women contributing to climate resilience is a big loss, and that must be tapped. So this is something that I really want to emphasize. Women as heads of, as managers of household, as custodians of biodiversity resources, traditional knowledge, and in fact, they are the conscience of humanity. So they have to be really both the objects and subjects of climate change policy. And that's why it's important to make climate policy gender sensitive, gender responsive. And we are very happy to see that this was recognized, not in the original agreement, Kyoto or UNFCCC agreements, but in Cancun, there was a recognition, and all 6 pillars of LCA recognize the importance of including and integrating gender aspects and gender perspectives and being gender responsive and gender sensitive. So this is something that we need to continue to build on, and we hope that both the commitment, women have a stake, very big stake in a good outcome here, both on the second period of second commitment period, and also on the implementation of LCA and closure of the LCA, because on both counts they would be beneficiaries. You know that in terms of women being affected by climate change, I want to point out that if you look at the 1.4 billion poor, majority are women. And climate change is increasingly affecting them in different ways. But the 3 key aspects of climate change impact are the areas where they are most engaged and most involved and affected. And these are water, energy, and food security, and agriculture, and also in natural disaster related contexts. So if you look at all of these contexts, it's women, whether in sub-Saharan Africa, whether in Asia, South Asia or Southeast Asia. It is women who have to travel more than 30 kilometers in sub-Saharan, in Southern Africa. Now 50% of the villages, people have to travel more than 30 kilometers to get water. That's the impact of climate change. And women do that. And that means that time poverty is exacerbated. Their opportunities for livelihoods, for education and income generation are lost because of that. Similarly, energy, fuel, access to fuel is also impacted. And if you look at equally the whole issue of food security, majority of women in these countries, both in Africa, 86% of African agriculture workers are women. Similarly, in Asia, this is also very high percentage. Men migrate to, even in China, men migrate to the cities and women are left behind to do agriculture. Most women are small smallholder farmers or agricultural laborers. So they are the ones bearing the brunt of climate change related impact. And if there is like Nino came, and in some African countries the yields went down between 20 to 50%, and the impact was on women farmers. So we need to provide them the resources to overcome those, to compensate for those those kind of regressive events, and then also build their resilience. So we are working on the ground in a number of countries in specific flagship projects to make sure that, first of all, women are empowered in terms of using their own agency to understand what are the likely impacts, to anticipate, to prepare, and also then to have resilience strategies. And we, for example, in Bangladesh, we are working with women's organizations to make sure, because it's one of the most disaster-prone, natural disaster-prone countries, climate change-related disaster-prone countries, and there we are working with women to make sure that they are able to work in alternative areas which are not susceptible to climate change related impacts. So they are into other areas like green technologies and eco-tourism and other areas. Similarly, in Pakistan we are working, in China we are working with women farmers to on water conservation technologies and projects, so that they are again better able to harness water resources to deal with climate change. So there are, and then as a example of South-South cooperation, we are working with a number of African countries and Latin American countries on solar power, and how these Barefoot College, we are working with them to make sure that these women, the grandmothers who are often unlettered, but who then become solar engineers, and they play a dual role of providing renewable energy to previously excluded from energy villages. Sure. And then at the same time they are able to generate income, and also the empowerment, economic empowerment that takes place in the process. So we are in a number of, in Vietnam it's a tremendous example. We are working with women's groups. There is a Vietnam Women's Union that we are working with on resilience to natural disaster building. And there, this is a group of 14 million Vietnamese women, and we are working on projects to spread the knowledge about what happens, what to do, what role can women play, and how can they organize communities. So it's an exercise in economic empowerment, but also political leadership in this area. So all of these prove that we have plenty of work to do, and we are also engaging and using our presence in 74 countries and other programs on economic empowerment, political participation, women in peace and security related context, conflict, post-conflict context, because that also creates its own amalgam with climate change related impact. And lastly, we are trying to also work with governments to make sure that their budgets and their development plans and their national adaptation plans, climate policies, that they are engendered, and in turn we try to see that climate policy is included in gender policies.